Hello?
Sister Heidi,
Yes. Hello, Mike. How are you?
God bless you. I'm doing okay.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, Pastor Paul has a bad tooth, and so you've got me instead.
Oh, we're good to go. Well, I hope Pastor Paul gets better.
Yes. Hmm. How are you today?
Well, I'm here.
Uh,
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
You're doing good?
Doing good.
How's the world doing?
Not so good.
Not so good, huh?
It's degrading.
Hmm.
It's well, it does seem like things are escalating
Yeah.
all over the place.
Well, where do you want to start?
Anywhere you want to start.
Okay. Did you find the 5 questions?
I think I did. I took a glance over those. I
Okay.
did.
Okay.
I did.
Well, you want to start in the Mideast
Well,
then?
we can go to the Mideast right now.
Okay.
I know that Israel is really in a fight, and it's starting to escalate beyond the boundaries of Israel naturally. And another U.S. fighter was engaged. That makes number 4 in the Middle East. So as you can see, this is escalating beyond the borders of Israel naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're going to have, if the escalation trend continues, we'll likely have greater deployments coming up, which is not at a good time because we still have domestic issues within the USA.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up within this country is going to put a strain on our forces, big time in the Middle East. It's not going to be an easy transition. Israel has of course, they're always in the fight for their lives, but you have these allied countries who are making their moves. They continue to probe. They're starting to, they're really hitting Israel on every side, and they're going to continue to do so until, they can absolutely coordinate, take around. One of the issues I see is the alliance in the Middle East against Israel has grown big time. It's really expanded. And they're starting to use more sophisticated tactics to get through any of Israel's defenses. And of course, they're gonna continue to do this until the hope for them is that somehow they can start what they want to start prior to Trump's inauguration. They don't want him in office. They do not.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want him in office, and that problem this time is within the USA too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be an ongoing issue that will eventually spread beyond the Middle East
Mm-hmm.
into other countries.
Yeah. So, what do you mean by the 4th fighter, U.S. fighter?
We've had some issues with some U.S. fighters that were attacked. I guess you could say targeted
Mm-hmm.
in the Middle East, and so many are calling it a huge escalation even right now. This war is expanding, and there are really no guarantees as far as containment or de-escalation. Of course, the Pope has. I remember a few weeks ago I was saying something about the Pope. He always makes his, when he makes his entry, his word is a final word of approval for operations for the world. Well, he spoke. He has spoken about Russia, the Ukraine, and the Middle East, and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And so plans will go forward now. They really will go forward. Once he speaks, for some reason, they begin to act pretty violently, expediently, you could say, against whatever they're doing. In this case, he was speaking about peace in the Middle East, but he was speaking in a strange way, peace by eliminating, or incarcerating certain individuals. That's not very clear at this point, but I believe that we're going to see a total change in the Middle East almost immediately. And so I would expect large-scale escalations in several areas. So I hope everybody is ready, because it's not an easy thing to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know they keep going with the ballistic missiles from Yemen. So it's like, how many times can they keep doing that?
Right. And then, of course, I believe they're having naval rearrangements. The bigger missiles and munitions will likely be used, I'd say, probably at the new year, at the mark of the new year. We'll see a different type of tactic being used. Israel won't continue to hit miss, so to speak, the small scale operations. They have determined they want to end the hostilities. In order to do that, that takes a really large bombardment of whatever their targets are. In this case, Iran directly, and that's going to really open up a hornet's nest. It's not going to be as easy as people think, and I do believe some of that Middle Eastern action is tied to some of the what people are observing throughout the U.S. And not necessarily the drone situation, because that's a very confusing situation. It's a combination of things people are saying. I think that most people are just taking notice of the skies a bit more than usual due to the Pentagon and Congress, of course, and their latest hearings, right? People are starting to pay attention. Mm-hmm. If you go back and look at some of the sightings that were taking place in the skies, they've always been like that. It's just that people don't look up. Now they're starting to look up, and they're beginning to notice what they can't identify. So, but it's always been like that. We may have small escalations, and people are starting to track down some very weird things. And there are groups that operate such things within the USA. Well, actually abroad. And this is a rumor. In about 30 days, it is said that two of the speakers for some of these groups are coming forward to inform the public of what they've been doing for the last 28 years. So we'll see in that arena. In other words, we have some shady operations happening all over the world that people are not, they're just not briefed on. They don't know about. And they are part of a power structure within a power structure. For example, when ex-military personnel get out of special ops or something like that, normally they do not transition into civilian life just without connections. They normally float into different operations that are off the books, so to speak. And so some of these guys are coming forward officially to inform the public of what's been happening, of what they've been working on, what they've been doing. I believe that's part of the struggle between the Trump government and the other government. So things like that will also be taking place, which is not good at wartime. The Middle Eastern factions will take full advantage of any American divide and divisions among the people. They will. They're going to take full advantage of it. I sincerely hope people are prepared to really see what war is about, but in a very cruel way. I hope that people are ready to see that.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's ever ready to see war, period.
No, no one wants to see it, that's for sure. But, sometimes we forget that we have been protected all this time. Things have been held back. The Lord's grace has been over us all this time.
Mm-hmm.
We're so used to it, we think it's normal. It's not normal. You know, things not blowing up in America close to our homes and this, that, and the other. That's not normal. That's grace. And I think that sometimes we've been, well, for a long time, we've enjoyed grace and mercy. For so long, we think we're owed grace and mercy. We think that the environment is that's how it's supposed to be. But historically, when you start looking back, that's not the way it was. And many things have been held back. Many things. We're just extremely blessed to have not, literally been set on fire yet. But that time, I'd say, given the people's disposition of faith and a lot of wickedness, especially with the children, that continues to escalate. We're going to have examples of what it is possibly not to have mercy in certain areas. People will begin to endure what they thought they would not, because the Lord has been kind and merciful, but He will not. This evil, some of these hidden evils that people have become so accustomed to, used to, where they can't see it. He won't suffer that always, and we're going to begin to see that. It seems to come in cycles. This is going to be one of the larger ones.
Mm-hmm.
We've had world wars, and it's gone to other lands, and it's devastated countries. America's been blessed, severely blessed. But even the elections give us a gleam into the some of the less resolvent nature of Americans. We have a divided community, you could say, and we have a lot of immoral activities taking place in this country, more than usual.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes with a consequence. And so we'll see a part of that. Normally repentance follows, and people begin to really take inventory of how good they really had it. Then they begin to see, what they took for granted. But this entitlement mentality that we so quickly adopt, as though we're due, peaceful day after peaceful day, and we almost seem like we're owed that without thinking about the Most High. And that's an issue, because that's spreading, and it's really affecting how we go forward as a nation. Somewhat obvious, but yeah. So these escalations will no doubt reach our shores. No doubt they're going to reach our shores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the drone situations, my thought, just Heidi's thought, for whatever good that is, was that of course drones can see overhead, so they can see if there's any camps that shouldn't be there, whichever, whether they're terrorist camps or whether they're domestic terrorists going on. Either way, so that can be surveillance that way. But also, they could also be sniffing out any nukes or any other kind of chemicals. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Well, yeah. If you think back to 2000 and 2007, and they were talking about a drone highway.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? When NASA was building a drone highway, in the FAA, in combination with NASA, were building that drone highway. This is when most of your, Amazon and Google and all these guys, they said we're going to have drones up in 5 years, delivering this, that, and the other. Well, they completed the highway, and as soon as they completed the drone highway, it was hijacked. So they couldn't really utilize it. It was hijacked, and so the highway exists, and it's been occupied. So that's complete with digital air traffic control, right? All vectoring for altitudes, for the drones is done. In essence, you launch a drone, and then the highway itself will instruct the drone where to go. That's how that works. It's not like anybody controls it. The highway controls it. It'd be like somebody jumping in a car and they get on the highway and they take their hands off the steering wheel. The destination is going to be worked out by the highway. So essentially, you have a computer system directing traffic up there. Now, it's been busy since 2000 and I believe 15. Very busy since 2015, but people don't look up. And the USA, one piece of technology that the USA has had for a while, it is well, it's not known. So I can speak about it because it doesn't exist. It's called an observation platform. Now, here's why I'm mentioning this. There are people out there that have seen a blur out of the corner of their eye, right? Like something was in the sky, but they missed it. They always just missed it. It leaves a blur. It's like a shimmer. It's almost like you can see right through it. These things are so incredibly fast. I mean, incredibly fast. And they have perfected the art of redirecting noise straight up in the atmosphere. So nobody's going to hear it on the ground. These observation platforms can hover right over your house, and you wouldn't even notice. And then when you look up, they can be gone, snap of a finger, and all you would notice is a blur, like part of the sky is distorted or something. And some people have noticed that, but those are all over the place. And I think that people are starting to notice new generations of those things, especially at nighttime. We also have a lot of civilian drones. We have the count of civilian drones that are being used has quadrupled in the last year alone. So we have a lot of drones out there, and some of those drones are quite large. They can pick up a couch, for example, and transport a couch. And that's just a standard drone that anybody can fly. One of the companies to look up for that, one of the companies that leads, two companies that lead in that is Altel and DJI. So if you look at either one of those, you'll start to see, okay, that capability exists. And, it makes these drones fly autonomously. They have perfected the flight of that drone, so it's not wobbly and all over the place, this, that, and the other. And they can fly by waypoints. So you can pre-program those drones. They have obstacle avoidance, so they have everything you would need to look like some of these lights in the sky. Now, after going over some of those photographs that people are seeing on the internet, some of those pictures that are being presented are somewhat disingenuous. I say that because some were taken back in 2013, some in 2010. They were actually matched with archival footage of the exact same image, exact same tree line, everything else, but the year was 2013. So some of those images are disingenuous. But most of those sightings are people are starting to take notice of everything in the sky. And of course, some people can't. They really can't. They get nervous. So they may see a Cessna or something like that flying, or a commercial aircraft at high altitude, and mistake it for something else, right? But some of those drones, for example, our military bases, when you have drones that fly over our military bases and hover for 2 hours, nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody does anything about it. Then it just leaves off the same vector, and it does this, 4 or 5 times a month. There's a problem. Yeah. And that should let everybody, why would the military allow any drone to hover over a facility for that long? Well, a lot of people they may not know this is a major deal. It has to do with UFOs and official policy. A long time ago, back in the 60s, over the nuclear bases, there were objects spotted. And nuclear war almost broke out about 12 times. um, in the world because of these objects. And these were not man-made objects to anybody's understanding. They were something else. Upon identifying those objects, it scared a lot of people, and they thought, the Russians thought it was the USA. The USA thought it was the Russians. Those in Germany and other countries, of course, they thought it was either Russia or the USA. So a global policy was set that when these things show up, all these bases will contact each other to verify it is not, them. That's a fact. They do that to this very day. If something shows up over Russia, everybody is notified that something is over Russia, and that everybody verifies it's not them. It's not us. They did this because these objects would appear, turn off the equipment, retarget the or give new targeting instructions to some of those analog computers, so on and so forth. Make the missiles inert, shut them down, start them up, do all sorts of things. And it almost started a war, more than a few times, about a little over a dozen times. And so that's an ongoing policy in quite a few areas. That's why a drone can hover over a base and they won't do anything, because if they can't identify it, they don't want to attack, because anything that can breach our airspace, with impunity, you don't really want to attack that. They have shot things down, they have, but they know what to shoot down and what not to. If it begins to interfere with the bases, they're not going to touch it, because they know they can't do anything. Anything they attempt to do is going to be, it's almost like anything they anticipate doing is shut down right before they do it. They found this on aerial engagements. They found this in nuclear facilities. So they can't do anything about that. They really don't want to disclose that, because that means you have no air superiority, and people would get nervous. Can you imagine if anybody announced that we can't do anything about those craft? Yeah. That would not be good. So the best thing they can do is give no answer. If they give no answer, right, then everybody, yes, they come up with narratives and they get frustrated, but they're not frightened to pieces. They're not scared to death, right? They still think that nations have air superiority, but we don't, when it comes to those things. But they will never admit that. They'll leave it in the gray area every single time, all the time. And it looks like more explanations will come forward concerning that. Not full explanations, that will never come. But they will, chip away and test the reaction of people through social media to see, what the real reaction of people will be. That will continue. That will continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, psych up.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, that will also increase. Since the New Jersey sightings, mm-hmm. I believe one of the numbers said it increased already about 120% globally. So it'll continue to increase globally. The difference is there have been, for example, was November, over 1,000 people were witness to, one sighting of something that everybody was estimating to at least be 2,000 feet in length, things like that. Some people were on a overpass or a highway or bridge or something like that, and some saw it from above and some saw it from beneath. They're becoming quite visible these days. And there are the personal encounters and the radioactive signatures left, when they leave. People are starting to see these things. We, or America, or special access programs, they develop things like that all the time. The guy at Northrop Grumman, he made a comment a few times historically. He said that, first of all, he was motivated by a triangle he saw when he was young. Mm-hmm. He saw a triangle when he was young. So we're talking about back in the 20s and 30s. And then some before him had actually sketched out the triangle with the three lights. And that was back in the 1800s. Now that's ironic. because they had triangle aircraft flying in the USA with, and other countries, obviously, with 3 lights and 1 red light in the center back in the 1800s. You start looking back in the 1700s, you get the same report. You keep going back and the same reports. So some craft have been persistent throughout time. They've seen these things. But these guys who started these companies were motivated by these very things. And one of the individuals who was head of Northrop Grumman said that whatever you've seen in Star Trek, he said they've already built it and achieved it, and they're able to do it. And it's, those things have been involved in. So they've been quite busy, developing things. Anti-gravity, things like that. Anti-gravity is not a mysterious thing. It's more misunderstood than anything else. It's just that people are not taught full sciences, right? Because science is just not, it's almost like they teach limitations so that a person can never get their mind past a certain point of exploration. But, it's misunderstood more than anything else. They've already achieved that several times over and utilize it. So to them, it's not this big deal. To everybody else, it is, because they can't, they're not given the academics to study and achieve it. They're always thrown off. They can't get things patented. That's a big deal. And, it stops there. But it's not, it's not what you would think it is. It's not a complicated process. It's kind of like combustion. Like the mystery of a car engine. For somebody who's never seen doesn't know about a car engine, they're asking, how's that thing moving? Well, we know it's by an engine and ultimately by combustion or some motors in there, but other people may not know that. And so anti-gravity is the same thing, same exact thing. But we have things.
I love that you said that it's actually because that you put limits on your mind, because that's right. The reality of it.
That's right.
We shouldn't be teaching our children to stop their curiosity.
And they do kill the imagination, don't they? You have problem children. I would consider myself a problem child. So as I went through high school and got to college, I questioned it too much, right, to the point of aggravation of professors. But it's just that I couldn't accept what I was seeing or hearing. The limitations that I saw were blatant. And even the professors had no answer for certain things I would ask. The textbooks didn't either. But they teach limitations, and it ruins. Well, the trick is this. And there's a very wise person told me this one. Says, he said in universities, they don't teach a person to be an entrepreneur. They teach people to be an employee. They teach people to be good employees. And so they teach them essentially, they indoctrinate them to become components in the world machine. So nobody goes higher than the machine itself. They just simply serve a purpose for the sake of that machine. They keep everything going within, the system, so to speak. But you have some people that think outside the box and still have an imagination. So that's a good thing. But yeah, kids are taught limitations big time.
Yeah. Oh, we all are. We all are taught that, unfortunately. But, and I think, I've been studying Jesus. That's exactly what he was going through. Everybody's like, I can only meet you where your level of faith is. So he was always just trying to prod everybody to expand their level of faith.
Oh yeah.
All right. So Russia. Let's go to Russia. Number one, we have a plane that was shot down, but also Russia expanded everything over the holiday. So what's going to happen with Russia here?
They're going to continue. They're not going to stop. The world is at war. That is ground zero for some of the larger confrontations that will take place. Belarus, for example, is done with Russia. they're giving warnings. The Pope has given warnings. Again, that was yesterday and the day before yesterday concerning the escalations. Too much death is involved, and Russia hit Ukraine hard, very hard. But if you notice, when the Ukraine war started, people must remember when the Ukraine war started, they evacuated. You remember they evacuated everybody from the Ukraine. And then what did they do? They cut off the borders. And they kept certain personnel in Ukraine. They could not escape Ukraine because they cut them off. And then you had an influx of soldiers from certain, unnamed countries pouring into the Ukraine to fight. So they pulled a fast one. What happened? We had troops in theater in Europe and everywhere else, and the people were coming from Europe going into the Ukraine. Of course, there are lots of Russia picks up evidence every single day from U.S. military operators in the Ukraine, which is not good. So he already knows this is not this is not a fight for the Ukraine or Kiev or Crimea, but this is a war against NATO. He already knows that. He's not going to stop his pursuit of what he thinks is freedom. Right? Because he thinks we are encroaching upon his country. And if we get a foothold in the Ukraine, for example, in that strategic location, he's going to lose control of his own country. He's not going to do that. Of course, the Ukraine was lost during the Chernobyl incident that broke the nation. And of course, everything fell apart since then. So it was dismantled. We'll say the Russia was dismantled and given a new identity. And then NATO has lied to Russia at every turn, so they can't trust NATO. They can't trust. They can't trust anybody outside of themselves. Every promise that NATO made Russia, he found out it was a ploy. It was a lie. Nobody fulfilled their promises. They could have had peace with Russia, but the problem was every time they promised, for example, freedoms of certain locations, that they would not take further ground, that NATO would not take further ground and set up shop in certain areas, they reneged. Not more than a year later, they reneged. They went back on the deal. They tried to renegotiate the terms of the deal, but Russia remembered the first deal, and they said, no, you can't do that. And so Russia was just simply not going to be pushed over like other countries were. When this happened, it caused a great rift in relationships and trust between NATO and Russia. And the hostilities we see now are in part because of that. So he's not going to stop. He will continue to fight until NATO holds no ground anywhere near that area. He will continue. And one of the big issues I see is this. There are many Islamic forces that are in Russian uniform right now. There are lots of Syrian fighters. Now, the fighters in Syria were coming from Iran to fight in Syria. They were ultimately transferred to Russia. Russia is full of Iranian soldiers right now. Right now, they're fighting every day. They're being trained every day. Now, while the USA is benefiting from not fighting our standard forces in combat right now, Russia is rotating. They're doing combat rotations of different nations. They're troops from different nations. They are actively training forces, and they have been doing this for some time. So we have the world outside of the USA they're being battle hardened by conflict. And you know what that means? They're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger and get rid of the weaknesses. And they're going to get stronger while we are wholly dependent upon technology. And certain tactics, we believe, work because of that technology. That's not a good tactic going forward for anybody. Because if we don't have proper combat training, then the stress factor is going to demean operations. If anything, when it breaks out on a larger scale, and we're going to, there's a price to be paid, a painful price to be paid always for any military who does that. In a time of wartime escalations, training is invaluable. We're not training like we should. We don't rotate people into active situations enough. And so you have the hardened military we used to have simply is not there. And what that means is they're not going to be able to fight long. Battle fatigue will settle in very quickly. And that's not going to be good. Our resolve is going to die while the other armies are used to rotating for 2 years at a time.
I find that interesting because so apparently it's not about religion with him, because he is a Russian Orthodox, if I'm correct, and he's all about Mother Russia. So and he would, in my opinion, he doesn't like Islam, but he's using them as a fighting force. Correct?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Lots of them. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Because I guess my worry is Islamic radicals seem to do the same thing in the end. They'll build up in forces and they will go rogue in a heartbeat. They're going to go rogue in a heartbeat. Now, they're in the area, Sister Heidi, where the nuclear weapons are. They're in that area. And some of the commanders are Islamic that are over those air defense and offensive air batteries. So if that's going to be compromised at some point, and they're not going to hesitate to fulfill their faith obligations, which is to burn the West. Whether people know it or not, the USA must be on fire for them to properly take down Israel. They already know that. They already know they can't take out Israel so long as we still exist. So in their hadith, we must be burning. We must be on fire. At the same time, Israel is on fire. Well, the only way they can achieve that, well, they can do it in a couple of ways. And they're probing right now with our nuclear facilities. They tried with power, but the yield just wouldn't be enough. They've tried with telephones to confuse communication, but we do have lots of redundancies with communication. They've tried with certain people planted in banking in the markets and this, that, and the other to cause that type of confusion. We recover too quickly. So now there's been an increase in probing or let's say found tampering of nuclear facilities. That's just not good. We have radioactive materials that are missing. The nature of nuclear material and how it can be encased without detection, that's been different too for about a year now. That means somebody can have a nuclear fissile material and encase it in a way that it cannot be detected, right? So it just can't be detected. Well, having that in mind, we know that unauthorized personnel have been captured in quite a few nuclear facilities, and it keeps happening. Just like those people that were flying drones around transformers attempting to cipher part of the power network. They weren't trying to blow up the transformer. They were trying to steal information from the data that will go through the transformer through those transmission lines. And we have that type of escalation. So at some point, we likely will entertain some type of meltdown in the USA. And of course, most of our facilities and most of our oil refineries and most of our gas operations are centralized right up the middle of the USA. Right up the middle. And Texas, in my opinion, Texas should be one of the most secured locations in the USA. It really should be. It is target number one. And, Texas is in trouble. They just they're not going to have the wherewithal to watch all of what they need to watch. They just won't. And so when the fires begin, Texas is going to be a big part of that. We just can't afford to have Texas compromised like that. If they set the gas on fire and the oil on fire, that with nuclear facilities, we're in trouble. They can set either one on fire, and it will, it's going to trickle up to many different systems right there in Texas. So, Texas needs some serious firepower and technology to keep it from the hands of the enemy. Now, having said that, now you may recognize some of the moves that have been taking place. Mm-hmm. But I think they need more. If you notice, most DoD industries, civilian-based contractors have moved to Texas. Mm-hmm. Most of them have, specifically for the DoD. So they have somewhat increased it. It's just not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. What's happening now in the USA right now, because it's not spoken about, because it's not reported, because people don't know about it. Of course, they're not going to have fear of it, but not knowing about it gives a false sense of security. But we're being probed in the USA. Worse than we know. It is worse than we know. It is quite serious. Kind of like that drone situation. While some of it is not serious at all, some of it is quite serious, right? And you said it yourself, that you believe that some of that could be nuclear, chemical, biologically connected. Well, I give that a thumbs up, 100% on that one, because some of the there have been some captured vehicles, so they know what they are. Mm-hmm. They know what they are, but they dare not say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another big question going on here is, should we have medicine on hand for radiation?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, always. Yeah. I tell you what, it seems minuscule, something that unnecessary, right? Mm-hmm. It's always going to be unnecessary until it takes place. And when it takes place, no one will be able to find it. Mm-hmm. The government has bought up most of the supplies. Mm-hmm. Then you have people in the civilian sector who support the government. They bought up the other half of supplies. Mm-hmm. So if you can find it, if you can find good batches, make sure they're credible batches, though. There have been some mishaps in that area. People always try to capitalize off of people's fears. Mm-hmm. And so they have been selling placebos, you could say, to folks, and nobody wants a placebo. But the what's available out there, it will essentially stop some of those particulates from tearing up the thyroid, because once the thyroid is the adrenal gland and thyroid and all those things are compromised, they will just radically deteriorate the body in a very bad way. And essentially, just in case nobody knows, radiation essentially destroys cellular tissue and matter, and you start to melt. Essentially, I'll say your blood vessels burst. They start leaking all over the place. You just start leaking, and it continues, and it won't stop. So there's no reversing it. So the best way to protect yourself is through prevention. That way, if they're on hand, if you hear about some sort of meltdown, you can, take your medication there. I don't want to say the name of the medication because it might draw the wrong attention to this topic, and we start having technical issues.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So also, I know that BP has those Geiger counter things that people can get too. Jesse has them over there in his place. So another great plague. We're already hearing about California locking down. What do you think?
He's in trouble, right? Didn't he? Didn't California somehow lose? It's up in the trillions now, I believe. Oh boy, it's a bad situation forming with California. let's just say that California is becoming unraveled, and the accounting books are being opened. I'll tell you something. A war is coming, a different type war, right? It, it seems that the book of secrets is going to be let out, and when it does, there's going to be some problems, because, for example, Elon has already found waste in excess of trillions already, in excess of trillions. Now, here's the benefit of that. And you remember the student loans that were forgiven? Well, they weren't forgiven, and now people owe that money back. Oh my, not good, not good. So Supreme Court shot that down. Why? Because we have an absolute institutional change taking place. And when people find out what has actually happened, they're not going to be happy. Anyway, I think that sometimes people jump the gun on certain things, I'll say. And it just so happens that came out at the same time the books were turned over. When something like that happens, it's very difficult to trust the authenticity of what they're calling for. Is the timing is too perfect, right? So at the same time, this missing money was that topic was brought up. All of a sudden, and the fear mandates comes back, and mandatory this and that, and investigations of another type. It's almost like all investigation assets have been redirected in the disease area, not the financial area, right? And so, but we'll see.
That's very interesting.
It is.
Good to know. Good to know. And unfortunately, we can't talk about situations, so we can't go deeper there.
All right.
So climate, the climate has been crazy. California had waves. Hawaii had waves. We keep having atmospheric rivers out of the Pacific Northwest. Somebody told me Australia's on fire. So what's going on?
Oh, this is the part that this is my grief. This part grieves me. The weather is grieving me. If people can't see it by now, something is different, and it has been for at least 5 years, longer than that, but essentially the 5 years we've been enduring this weather has been just drastic changes. Escalation after escalation, increase. The trends are increasing. The winds are breaking all records, temperatures breaking records, storms breaking records, floods breaking records, right? Everything weather related breaking records. And it's been increasing mathematically, right? It's been increasing mathematically year by year. So it's easy to see that 2025 is going to be devastating. I'll go ahead and say it. It'll be devastating as far as conditions are concerned. I don't like heat. The heat is coming. Nobody can do anything about that. Nobody can. It's already been identified what's causing the heat. That's been identified for some time now. It's pitiful. They continue to use the narrative for the sake of the system and navigating people's minds in certain areas with climate change, because we're not talking about something isolated to Earth. It's not, and they know for a fact climate change. All of what we're seeing in the climate is due to the changes in the sun. And the changes in the sun should be the question. What's causing the sun to change? They won't bring that up. Have you noticed? They will not bring that up. They try to say, this is a normal solar maximum minimum cycle. No, it isn't. And it's highly abnormal. Highly abnormal. Something is affecting our sun in a very big way. It's reflecting in the activity of the sun, the chemistry of the sun changing, thus changing our circumstances here on this earth. And they're going to continue to escalate. So we're at a critical junction, though. is what I want to mention. Everybody should remember back in the 90s when they said, hey, if if our temperature increases at 1.5 degrees, you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They were saying everybody's in trouble. It's kind of like when they said, if Russia in 30 more days, Russia's going to have a breakthrough, or Russia's going to, they're going to have nuclear weapons. Well, they've been saying that since 1998, right?
Right.
And you mean to tell me they still don't have nuclear weapons? Sometimes we hear, we don't, but we don't hear, right? We hear and don't hear. The weather is the same way. They continue to say every single year that if we go, they stop saying it, by the way. You don't hear anybody saying if we go up another 1.2 degrees, we're in trouble. You don't hear anybody saying that because we've gone up 1.2 degrees 4 times already. 4 times. And the every meteorologist out there is under pressure. Can you tell? Because when they start reporting the weather, they are extremely careful to go only with what the model is saying. So if they don't have the model for it, the European or USA or East and West model, they're not going to use anything. They will not give their opinion of the weather. They will stay within the parameters of what the computer data is telling them. That should capture everybody's attention who was ever interested in weather. That they are afraid. Probably they'll lose their jobs, but they cannot speak outside of those given parameters. Why? Because we have weather that is off the scales. It is unnatural. And it also matches a time historically when other people had to go through the same thing. Of course, not this severe and not this fast. Our weather developmental changes have taken place in the last 5 years. Normally it takes, 150 to 200, 300 years to achieve. Not this fast. They have doctored. They started keeping weather records some time ago, right? But they've doctored the records. The records cache from the 70s and the 80s do not match the records that they're referencing now. An amazing thing, huh? All this data has become digital. Nobody has, access to books anymore. There are no encyclopedias of historical weather. Because it's digital, it can easily be changed, and they are utilizing that to the best of their own advantage. But the weather trends that we see, based on those trends, here's what we can look forward to. Of course, hurricanes come inland, right? The trending due to wind speeds and temperature shears will place hurricanes all the way to the Great Lakes this time. And instead of one actually having all the energy to make it that way, we're going to have the Gulf. The Gulf is going to be full of fuel, right? But the Gulf, if you notice this year, the heat expanded. It expanded beyond Florida, going into the Atlantic. And so now we're going to have a conveyor belt of fuel that will go to any storm. That's bottom side fuel. Top side fuel is going to fuel it even more. Through this, the added particulates in the upper atmosphere, this compression event is going to cause these storms to become much more violent. They won't, because storms right now do not need the altitude they used to. A cumulonimbus cloud would have to develop at a certain, it had to be so tall, a specific height to cause, a specific type of lightning and rainfall, this, that, and the other. All that's been compressed because the ionosphere is now becoming dense for the first time in recorded history that we know of. Is becoming dense. So as more and more particulates continue to build up in the upper atmospheres, then you have friction. You actually have physical components for friction. Well, the friction is going to reveal the real temperature up there, which is 5,000 plus degrees. Now imagine anybody can go up there right now and nothing will happen. Right? Because it's, I'd say if this were 5 years ago, nothing would happen. Right now, you're going to start feeling prickly. But there was a time when you could put anything up there, no big deal. No big deal. Because there weren't enough particulates to transfer the energy from one object to another. Heat is transferred through matter, right? So without matter, you're not going to have a heat or cold transfer of anything. As these particulates continue to come in from outside our heliosphere, it's building up in the upper atmospheres, and that heat is building. It's going to get to the point where we're going to have a one big halo over the earth. So think of the sky in not too far in the future as a shimmering gold burning sky. That's very hot. That's what will happen when we hit a certain point of density in the upper atmospheres. It will seemingly ignite. And then we're going to be in real trouble until it can totally burn out. So that's a real thing. That's a very real thing. And we're approaching that. There are no time estimates on it. The process has already begun. It is ongoing. It is exponential, and it's not stopping. So weather will be, storms are going to be, I'd say about 2.5 times worse than what they were this time. We were so blessed. Elena was one of the biggest ones we had to deal with, and that caused what, $50 billion in damage by itself. That was a lot, and people are still recovering from Elena. When it's all said and done, they said it will likely reach about $600 billion dollars in damages. Insurance companies, however, more insurance companies have gone under from these storms. So the storms are causing financial woes. We have, in January, not to alarm anybody, but you have a lot of retail stores closing in January, lots. There's a mandate. They're going to try and get rid of all their inventory, just about everybody in the USA, because taxes are ridiculous for businesses. And you're going to be taxed on that inventory that you carry. So they're going to get rid of inventory, because who in the world would buy an item for the price of $10 wholesale, but then you get taxed $21 if you have it in your inventory? Of course you're going to sell it, and you're going to give it away if you can, but they're going to make something off of it. So look for prices to be slashed up to 75 to 80%, sometimes getting it at cost. That's going to happen. But a lot of retail stores are closing. The list is growing, and when you start seeing some of your lower income stores, like your dollar stores, right? Those hold the dollar store chain. They're closing all over the place.
Yeah.
All over the place. If you've ever heard of a store called, what is that store called? Big Lots. It is, all of it's part of the same system. Like on merchandise, you'll see a tag. Like if you buy something that's been rejuvenated, so to speak, it'll say sell at dollar stores only or something like that, right? That means that the item has been repurposed. Same item, but the contents may be expired or less potent or altered in some sort of way. Well, that was important for a lot of communities to be able to go and get cheaper items like that. But then the prices began to rival everybody else's. And now they're shutting down. At least 80% of dollar stores are going to be shut down by March of 2025. That's awful, right? So then you also have you have a retraction of some of these larger chains that were spreading around, right? And some of the smaller stores, like your Kroger's, like your Food Lions, like all these different grocery stores, you're going to see a lot of those go out of business. They're going to be shut down too. So we have a consolidation of sales, the sales mechanics in America. Why? Because we have the new identification systems, the new purchasing systems, the new point of sale systems. All those systems are changed. And so whatever's out there now, everything you see out there now is antiquated. The barcode, right? The barcode technology, the software and the adaptability and everything, it's been highly perfected. They're going to go with that. They're going to go with since artificial intelligence is so efficient, we're going to be much like China. So that means you'll be seen everywhere all the time for the rest of your days. And because of that, your access is going to be purely based on biometrics without flaws. So you won't need, you're not going to need certain stores, and you're not going to need the diversity as you once had. They're going to also consolidate products. So you have a lot of manufacturers going out of business. They're going to be repurposed into something else. So the variety is about to go away in a big way. That means, instead of buying 20, instead of having, 10 different types of Tide, you may have 2. Instead of saying, 10 different types of detergent, you may have 2, right? Fast food restaurants, for example, there are a lot, I think they said 50% of these fast food restaurants are going to be shut down by the 3rd month in 2025.
Wow.
Totally shut down. Yep. So there's going to be a consolidation of everything. Why? Because everything is changing, and it has to do with our atmosphere. It has to do with how they, take care of cattle and how they take care of the farms. They cannot do as they used to do. They just simply can't do that. They have put their fingers, Sister Heidi, into the some of the food and everything else for cattle, trying to make them resilient against radiation, all these different things. But they've essentially tampered with our environment so much that they have, it's all out of whack. And now a time has come that I guess they thought they were preparing for, but they have done more damage than good. Now that the heat is coming, the heat and the water is coming. The heat and the water is going to be vicious. So nobody should be surprised if they entertain a year of tsunamis. And what I mean by that, we're going to have large land disruptions in the ocean. There are going to be tsunamis in a lot of places. I would also expect more than a few 9.0 plus earthquakes in the ocean. That will cause those tsunamis. Magma breaches are almost constant now. When you see magma breaches in the desert, you've made it. That means, it's really breaching. So that's what we're having. Africa is sad to say, but a lot of people have been hurt in Africa due to, magma being on the move and fires bursting out of the earth. Sinkholes have come back. Just this week, there have been some pretty large sinkholes. One took a big, huge portion of a highway, and some other, property outside of that, but it was huge. That was taken. We all know about the floods that people have been enduring. Texas right now, this is December, and Texas has tornado warnings, Louisiana and all those places in Arkansas, and they're going to continue to have these Gulf-fed disastrous storms, but the water has taken its toll. And you'll begin to notice that these storms that are, 3, 4, 5, 7 inches of rain, they're going to just start devastating everything. Our infrastructure, the highways, right, the roads, you can't take that type of inundation over and over again. You can't do it. It will crumble at the seams. That means lots of landslides and land deformations. Not because of volcanism or anything, but land deformation simply because the contents underneath our feet is changing, right? It's being eroded. And we're going to face a lot of adverse conditions. And that will only be the beginning, because the weather is still going to escalate. It'll escalate to the point where it's going to be very difficult for people to enjoy themselves outside, because of the winds and uncertainty of lightning and the sun. The sun is going to be quite dangerous this year. But we're going to, we're seeing all this develop. And they're trying to normalize it by smiling on all weather stations like it's normal.
Smiling.
And they do. They make it a point to smile.
I was saying before you got on here, they took all the eggs off the shelf. All the eggs are recalled.
That's not all that's being recalled. The beef is next. They have no choice. They, what, it really lets you know something. You know how a lot of people say they want to kill us, right? They want to kill us off. Well, they don't want to kill you in the way that you think. To kill a person is to kill their will,
Mm-hmm.
to kill their own personal purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you can cause a person to become essentially an automaton, that's what they want. They want a person to live their prescribed way of life, not a person's own way of life. In other words, they don't want a person uh, to live their life full of faith, full of these things, because it allows a person to discern what they're doing, and they hate discernment of people. They know people aren't dumb. They hate discernment, and so. Do you know there will be releases on this, by the way, and as soon as it comes out, I'm going to capture one, make sure you guys get it if you don't find it first. But there will be a release of a type of assault that's been upon the minds, the carnal minds of people, their natural minds of people, so they're not so creative. Because if you noticed, I'd say in the last 20 years, creativity has dropped down so low. Some of the artists that are out there, I can almost guarantee they're having an issue being creative.
Mm-hmm.
They still have the talent, but the creativity is not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
That inspiring spark is just elusive. It's very difficult to get a hold of, and that part of that is due largely to nutrition. Because if they can nutritionally depress a person will mentally follow. Unless now as a Christian, we're to learn, and it can be learned to not live by the mandate of flesh,
Mm-hmm.
right? But to command our flesh, to discipline our flesh is where it starts. But if people can't do that, if they don't have that ability, and that's only through Christ, they're prone to whatever the flesh is being subjected to, and given that, most people have a depressed nutritional values in their system. Most people, Americans especially, I believe it's 86% are dehydrated all the time. Now they absolutely control your water intake. The truth be told, nobody who has a lab at home that can examine the water they drink.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're still trusting labels. And unfortunately, we don't live in an honest and forthcoming world.
Mm-hmm.
We're trusting labels, and that's a big issue. Of course, we have Christ, so we can pray over things, and He can, whatever's meant for evil will be used for for the glory of the Lord and for our sakes. But the world doesn't have that, and so they're absolutely controlling everything, causing people to not be creative, right? To be more prone to this routinistic lifestyle of their choosing, and people are finding comfort in pleasing the system. And then they do what they want to do. But it's an absolute psychological job on people's mindsets. Then you have your rebellious ones. That's what they call Christians. They rebel against that system of living, because they say if they can get everybody on that system, everybody's prosperous and everything works, right? But Christians are rebellious because we see iniquity. That's the problem. They believe everybody should be able to exercise. Now, this is coming from, I don't want to be divisive here, but this comes from a particular part of our government. But they believe that people should be able to freely exercise whatever they desire they want to become. They believe they ought to have the resources and the space to become anything they want to be. Anything. I mean, anything. And so with those policies that have been pushed forward, it's giving everybody a license to act on their own rebellion. That's what I'll say. That's just simply acting on our own rebellion. We get mad at the world, we get mad at people, and all of a sudden we want to disassociate from our identity connected to this person, that family, this person, and become something totally different that we feel accepted in. That's why so many changes, so many policies deal with changing of a person's physicality to give them a license to become a part of something else they never were a part of, but to fully reject, where they came from, wherever the problem stemmed from. All that is happening due to an absence of Christ in people's lives, right? Because if they don't, if there's an absence of Christ, there's no healing. If there's no healing, a person does not recover from traumatic things of the past. And if that's not done, well, then there's only one escape from, well, there are two ways to escape that. But one way is to totally rebel against what you are, and it becomes something else. So you can have a new life. And unfortunately, we live in a world just like that offers that. Well, for now, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
For now, anyway.
But unfortunately, we're too close to the end. We have to make sure that we have compassion and love, and
Yep.
and not be operating in anger and all of these things. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're very close. So back. I totally got off the weather, Sister Annie. Back to the weather again. We're gonna have to. I hate to say it, it's gut wrenching because I just don't like to see people lose everything. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's ever gone through that, they know what loss is. Mm-hmm. And although I may be somewhat immune to it now, I'm still very sympathetic to people who go through it for the first time, or who go through it the second time or third time, and that time is certainly coming. We're going to see our land start to crumble big time. Mm-hmm. And the water is coming. The water's coming. If the land fails, we are already in the water. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Most of Earth is water. If the land fails, if the land erodes, we're already in the water. If in the oceans, if we have a sudden shift of land masses, and we will 1,000% have a sudden shift of land masses in the ocean, we're going to have a sudden rise of water on one side of the continent, followed by a dramatic decrease of the level of water on the other side. And it will level off, and that's going to take some time for it to level off. We're going to see that type of event. Mm-hmm. And there will not be a spot on the earth where you'll be able to step that's not soggy. Now, God said he would not destroy the earth by water. This won't be destruction, but it will certainly be it's going to give some folks some headaches. It's going to be a challenging situation. And when it happens the first time, that's when people will notice, this is possible. But that, based on the trends, it's going to be followed by nothing but dryness. And when I say nothing but dryness, I mean no rain whatsoever will fall. Mm-hmm. People are going to start to see the clouds totally dissipate. How will that happen? Through that particle density increase in the upper atmospheres. It's going to start drying everything out. That's when humidity drops to 8%. And we're going to be in. So imagine no water or no rain for a year, for the first year, right? That'll be devastating. And then imagine that continues. Mm-hmm. It does not abate. It continues. Those are the types of environments we're coming into. Everything will be dust on the surface of the earth without water. Yeah, because the particle count is becoming so dense. They have moved so many satellites in different orbits to avoid this. Friction is building up on the satellites to the point where they have to move them. They have to move them to a higher altitude to get away from the friction. Now that should alert everybody that yes, we have a changing atmosphere at an accelerated rate. Mm-hmm. But there we are.
Yeah. What are we going to talk about next week?
Well, as I said before, there are some groups that are going to start speaking out. Now, let's go ahead and face it. There's some political groups that have been doing things within the USA. A war, this I'm going to call it not war. Let's call it this tug of war that we're about to see is going to come from. It's going to be from one government attempting to really set some things straight. But here's the issue. How do you stand in the middle of a beastly kingdom and set it straight? Hopefully everybody is mindful of this because we're not exactly in days of light. This world is extremely dark, and the systems produce dark things. You know how Jesus said, "You'll know a tree by its fruit."
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the fruit of these governments, you'll see what they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're not holy. So you have an administration coming in, attempting right now at least to totally confront this darkness. Is what they're doing. It's going to be a war
Mm-hmm.
because Satan does not lose territory. He doesn't lose territory. So there's going to be some serious weird announcements, weird things, and it would. I get, I'm seeing it now. It would take a person just like uh, Donald Trump to get that done because nobody else can make a statement. He's going to have to make statements that sound absent. They're going to sound like me. That's absolutely ludicrous. And so he can't do. Trump is the guy to do that. Nobody else could do that because people say, "What's wrong with him? Is he? What's wrong with him?" But Trump's going to have to go there because people, for the first time, people will be confronted by certain manifestations and certain uncoverings of certain things. And it's not going to be some easy thing to handle. It won't be. So I think, he must be the guy appointed to stand up during this time.
Must be. Must be. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight and helping me through this.
Sister Heidi, it's an honor. Tell Pastor Paul, I hope he gets better. If he can hear me, I hope he gets better. Just to confess, there is an assault upon folks who, especially folks like Pastor Paul, right? Because he's not backing down.
Right.
We know how Satan works.
Yes.
And he will attack physically, and God will allow challenges from time to time. But we always, the Lord is so good because we're operating by his timing, and nobody can take command of our Lord and Savior. He will determine how long our hours are, what our employment is and when it's over. He determines that, not Satan or any other thing can determine that, only him. So that's a good thing to know.
Amen.
That's a good thing to know. So I hope he gets better, though. I'm praying for you guys, for your strength, and I guess we'll get ready for 2025.
Yes.
That sounds so strange. That doesn't sound real. That sounds fake. It really does sound fake.
Yes.
Okay. Quarter for the quarter. We're truly in the quarter now.
Yeah.
Well, Sister Heidi, God bless you. It's always an honor. Pastor Paul, God bless you too, and everybody out there.
All right.
God bless.
Blessings to you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that was amazing, as always. And so, even more amazing, Pastor Paul is going to end it out. All right. Love you guys. Thank you. Thank you for hanging in here with me.